In 1992, Democratic presidential candidate Bill Clinton frequently exited the dice to the strains of Don't Stop, a song that perfectly captured the energy and youthful vitality of his campaign. At his appearances, he offered not only the 1977 Fleetwood Mac hit, but also a larger campaign playlist comprised primarily of R&B, pop, and classic rock oldies that affirmed his optimism and hip retro tastes. Perhaps capitalizing on the nostalgia explosion in advertising and on screen at the time, Clinton's playlist evoked the safety and security of an imagined past for baby boomers, the cohort to which the candidate belongs. The Arkansas Natives team emphasized his small-town Southern roots and branded him as the poster child of the 1960s. So in this regard, the playlist tied into the nostalgic narratives that fomented around his candidacy, as well as his campaign platform and ideological orientation. And it is important to note that with his playlist of classic popular songs and his own saxophone performance of Elvis Presley's Heartbreak Hotel on the Arsenio Hall show, Clinton was constructing not merely his presidential identity, but the identity of the American presidency as well. My name is Dana Gorzelany-Mostak, and I am an associate professor of music at Georgia College and founder of Trax on the Trail, a website and research project that tracks and catalogs music heard on the U.S. presidential campaign trail. Our team includes over 30 collaborators across the U.S. and Canada, as well as student research assistants, including Haley Strasburger and Sarah Griffin, right here at Georgia College. Founded in 2015, Trax on the Trail was created to promote a more critical evaluation of how music and sound shape our perceptions of presidential candidates. From the presidential bid of William Henry Harrison in 1840, who was serenaded by a band of boisterous ale imbibers, to Donald Trump, who entered the Republican National Convention to the chorus of Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA, the campaign song has played a significant role in presidential campaign pageantry. Whether live or broadcast via media, music can direct the emotions of listeners, communicate ideas about candidates, and build a meaningful and enduring sense of community among constituents. In this lecture, I'm going to briefly discuss the history of the campaign song, before turning this talk over to Haley and Sarah, who will offer a comparative analysis of the 2020 Republican and Democratic national conventions.
The typical campaign song from the mid-19th century to the 1970s featured a newly written text set to a contemporary popular song, well-known melody, or newly composed tune. This process of grafting a new text onto a pre-existing tune is called parody. Whig candidate William Henry Harrison's team became the first to promote singing as a worthy campaign activity. At this time, song lyrics were typically circulated in small books called songsters. Harrison's detractors derided the throngs of unruly singers at his events, but their noisy refrains seemed to do the trick. At least one commentator proclaimed Harrison as the first candidate, quote, sung into office. Tippecanoe and Tyler, too, set to the melody of the minstrel song Little Pigs, remains the most well-known of the hundreds of songs composed to support Harrison's candidacy. The song's lyrics praise the down-home virtues of the log cabin-dwelling Harrison and chide his opponent, Martin Van Buren, as an out-of-touch aristocrat. But, to use a modern term, this song was 19th century fake news. Harrison actually hailed from a wealthy Virginia family, owned 2,000 acres of land, and probably never pushed a plow. When they took the negative route, campaign songs typically hurled generic insults at the candidate of the opposing party. But in some instances, these songs drew on gossipy chatter to call into question a candidate's morality. Such is the case with this next song, which is about a 19th century paternity suit. Ma, Ma, Where's My Pa refers to a rumor circulating during the 1884 presidential election that Grover Cleveland allegedly fathered a child out of wedlock back when he was a lawyer in Buffalo, New York. Choosing candor over lies, Cleveland admitted to a liaison with the child's mother and to paying child support, all while claiming there was no proof of his paternity. H.R. Munro's bit of musical mudslinging features a narrator's voice in the verses, but Cleveland's alleged baby mama and brat lament Daddy's departure for the White House in the chorus. Unlike Tippecanoe and Tyler, too, Ma, Ma, Where's My Pa features a newly composed song along with a new text. Like many campaign songs of the era, this song was published in the form of sheet music, which enabled the candidate's supporters to sing the candidate's praises, or, in this case, his detractors, to sing of his indiscretions at the piano in their own homes.
By the time the middle of the 20th century rolled around, songs from the Broadway stage and the film musical were all the rage. Rather than attacking the opposition, as was customary in earlier songs, these offerings instead lavished praise on the candidate and cited his noble qualities. Irving Berlin reworked the jaunty song They Like Ike from his musical titled Call Me Madam for Dwight Eisenhower's 1952 presidential campaign, and other candidates in the 1950s and 1960s followed his lead by saturating their campaigns with show music. The most famous were Hello Dolly, which became Hello Lyndon for Lyndon B. Johnson, and High Hopes for John F. Kennedy, which featured a new text sung by the politician's friend, none other than crooner Frank Sinatra. In I Like Ike, the Uncle Joe that the song refers to is none other than Joseph Stalin. By the time the 20th century neared its close, parodies like Tippecanoe and Tyler 2 and I Like Ike, and newly composed songs such as Ma Ma Where's My Pa moved to the periphery as candidates increasingly turned towards pre-existing songs. That is, unaltered popular songs that have already circulated on record, radio, film, or television. For example, many of you will remember Ronald Reagan's use of Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA for his Morning in America themed re-election campaign in 1984, wannabe cowboy George W. Bush's use of Brooks and Dunn's Only in America in 2004, or, of course, Clinton's Fleetwood Mac song Don't Stop, which opened this lecture. Pop songs offer candidates a new horizon of possibilities when it comes to branding, identity formation, and communication. They offer up rich histories, associated cultural texts, a complex web of connotations, and audiences already culturally invested in them. That is to say, a song or a group of songs can communicate a political message, an ideological orientation, a worldview, or a set of values, and this effective and persuasive power resides in its sounds, not just the semantic content of its lyrics. The added benefit of a pre-existing popular song is its familiarity with the listener. Thus, the musical exchange between candidate and constituent forges a cultural intimacy that a newly composed song cannot. The team at Trax and the Trail relies on these additional analytical parameters in order to assemble a nuanced and complex picture of how old songs acquire new meaning in campaign contexts.
To demonstrate some of the ways in which this meaning is generated, we are going to discuss our comparative analysis of the 2020 Republican and Democratic National Conventions, which were held this past August.
The convention coordinators have a long history of selecting music to reinforce their political narratives, establish a sense of community among constituents, and foster a common sense of purpose among voters and candidates alike. Convention music takes many forms. It can be live or pre-recorded, it can be background music in an ad, or even simple instrumental music during moments of transition. Each musical selection has some sort of importance to the campaign or the candidate at large. As Dr. James stated earlier, when we study the usage of these songs in presidential campaigns, we take a variety of factors into consideration.
First, we will take a look at the different types of music that candidates often use during the election season. Here, you'll see a breakdown of the three most common types of music that we track on the trail: underscore, pre-existing songs, and newly composed songs, as well as a pie chart for each national convention that compares their usage of each type. Figure 1 displays the breakdown of music types at the DNC, and Figure 2 does the same for the RNC.
One of the largest categories of music used by candidates, both in the national conventions and during other political events or in advertisements, is the underscore. An underscore is typically an instrumental or orchestral selection that serves as background music. In other words, you typically won't recognize an underscore's performer or composer when you hear it, because the goal of the music is typically just to accompany a visual medium. This is similar to the use of soundtracks in film scores. The music is somewhat invisible and serves to shape our emotional expectations and interpretations of visual and textual components of the scene.
The next two types of music, pre-existing and newly composed, are more recognizable and memorable. A pre-existing song is music that has already been released and is typically popular in the eyes of the public. Therefore, this will help instill connections between the candidate, their party, and the music itself. Dr. GM opened with Don't Stop by Fleetwood Mac, which Bill Clinton famously used in 1992, for example.
The final category we're focusing on is newly composed music, which is any song created for the purpose of representing or reflecting a particular candidate, party, or political issue. One of the most famous examples from a recent campaign is will.i.am's Yes We Can, which takes its inspiration from one of Obama's 2008 speeches on the trail. We'll talk about a recent example of this, Billie Eilish's My Future at the DNC this year, but another example is Camille and Haley's duet Keep America Great, which was first performed in June of this year, right outside the Tulsa rally.
As you can see, underscores, pre-existing songs, and newly composed songs were heard at the national conventions. The DNC was almost evenly split between pre-existing songs and underscores, with only a few newly composed songs, while the RNC primarily made use of underscores with a much lower of pre-existing songs and no newly composed songs. The relative absence of pre-existing songs at the RNC is likely due to a number of factors. The Trump campaign focused their efforts on utilizing patriotic and film-style underscores to create a homogeneous musical identity, which was aided by a lack of recognizable or ephemeral pop songs. As we discussed earlier, underscores mimic film soundtracks, and in Trump's campaign, this music is evocative of action or war movies in its nationalistic and heroic leanings. The Democratic National Convention and the Biden campaign instead utilized various pop rock, R&B, and rap selections to suggest a more diverse musical and therefore social foundation for their political goals.
When tracking music used in political contexts, one criteria we identify is musical genre. This factor applies only to the pre-existing and newly composed music for these events and focuses on grouping music into categories based on the conventional musical elements that define these songs. As you see here, figures 3 and 4 feature a comparison of musical genres featured in the Democratic and Republican national conventions. Figure 3 shows that the DNC featured a total of 145 entries of music, while the RNC featured 125 as seen in Figure 4. In comparing the musical genres used in the DNC and RNC, these charts indicate that the most featured musical genre at the DNC was pop rock, while the RNC's most featured genre was patriotic music.
Now exclusively focusing on the pre-existing and newly composed music included in these events, we can see that the Democratic National Convention definitely engaged with more varied genres of music than the RNC. Both conventions did utilize a significant amount of pop rock selections, 38.8% for the DNC and 21.7% for the RNC. Figure 4 displays less variety with regards to genre overall, primarily because the RNC utilized underscore more frequently, and underscores are not typically assigned a genre.
Next, we'll focus on one example of music for each national convention, starting with the newly composed song My Future by singer-songwriter Billie Eilish for the DNC.
The performance opened with a brief speech from Eilish outlining the importance of voting, especially for millennials like herself, and her own political beliefs, including her endorsement of Joe Biden. Her song instills the same values, and although the lyrics aren't explicitly linked to politics, they highlight the importance of focusing on the future and acting in ways to make it better for all of us. The song, performed live as a video stream during the virtual DNC, had a sobering and melancholic melody, accompanied by Eilish's own keyboard playing and drums and guitar players. Eilish's fanbase is defined primarily by her emo pop persona and is heralded by waves of teenage and early 20s supporters across all genders. Her participation at the DNC is noteworthy because it represents an attempt by the Democratic Party to align with younger generations of voters and encourage them to engage with modern American politics. As millennials make up the majority of Billie Eilish's fan base, her performance is especially important in its power to motivate them and to register to turn out to vote in the 2020 presidential election. This age group, 18 to 29-year-olds, has historically had a less than 50% voter turnout in recent years, with 46.1% turnout in the 2016 presidential election.
The next selection comes from the final night of the Republican National Convention when classical crossover tenor Christopher Macchio performed a rendition of Schubert's Ave Maria alongside other operatic and patriotic tunes, such as God Bless America and Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. Macchio had previously performed for Trump at various parties and social gatherings, as well as recently at Trump's brother's funeral. Accompanied by a small string section and a pianist, the performance was featured as part of the fireworks display held at the White House at the conclusion of the convention. The selection of Ave Maria is somewhat unusual, partially due to its Latin text and Catholic associations.
However, religious connotations are not new to the Republican Party or Trump's campaign. Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah was performed twice at this RNC, though not without controversy, perhaps suggesting a hagiographical connection with the current president, and God Bless America is a favorite at Trump political functions. Trump's campaign has often been fond of utilizing operatic or other classical instrumental and vocal works during election season, and this usage of classical crossover, as we refer to the genre, implies that this historical music has been repackaged and combined with American imagery to be viewed, listened to, and enjoyed by the American public. This music does foster patriotic sentiments among Trump's constituents and the Republican Party as a whole, but this might also serve to alienate non-religious voters, as there seems to be a commingling of patriotic songs, quasi-religious songs, and patriotic songs that evoke religious themes. However, songs such as God Bless America, Hallelujah, and Ave Maria, although the latter two are not American songs per se, have long been tied to America in times of both grief and celebration, and by using these songs in this context, Trump ties his own candidacy into the great American narrative as seen through the lens of traditionalism.
As you can see, through these examples from the recent Democratic and Republican national conventions, music serves an important role in not only advertising and representing political candidates, but in crafting and substantiating significant political identities in an election year.
Each candidate's choice of music offers insight into how they view their campaign, their political objectives, and the voting public. As we study this music and its role in politics, we are able to learn more about how music and media shape our ever-evolving political soundscape.
Thank you for watching our Alumni Weekend Lecture. We hope you'll check out our work at www.traxonthetrail.com, where we have a variety of resources to help inspire political engagement and awareness about campaign music.